Good morning and welcome to week 2 of Introduction Interest Sessions. Yesterday we got to hear from 5 different faculty members across campus about their teaching and research. If you'd like to watch those anytime, they are posted on our YouTube channel, Oregon Welcome. This session will also be posted there afterward today. Each Friday this summer we will be offering several interest sessions focused on helping our new ducks and their supporters get to know more about the tons of resources, programs, and services we have to help you be successful at the University of Oregon. Today's presentations will feature information on Pathway Oregon, mental health services and resilience, and PE and recreation services. We also have a special program for parents and families called Protecting the Flock. If you're a student watching in Zoom, I encourage you to use the Q&A feature to ask your questions. Staff are answering there, and some of your questions will be answered live on camera once the presenters are done. If you're a parent or family member watching in Facebook, we also have staff answering questions on that platform. In a minute, I will turn things over to our presenters who will share information with you. After they're done, we will make sure that to answer your questions live on camera, so keep those questions coming in the Q&A feature on Zoom. At this time, I'm pleased to welcome Jeff Ransford and Selena Simpson from the Pathway Oregon Advising Team. They're here to discuss the ins and outs of Pathway Oregon and make sure that you get your feet off, you get off on the right foot. Pardon me. Hi, Jeff. Hi, Selena. How are you?
Hi, Cora. Hello, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. My name is Jeff Ransford, and I'm an advisor on the Pathway Oregon Advising Team.
And I'm Selena Simpson, also a Pathway Oregon advisor. I'm going to start us off. I want to welcome you to the Pathway Oregon session. Thanks, Cora. So we are here to help you understand Pathway Oregon. First, we want to congratulate you on being Pathway Oregon recipients. Please give yourselves a hand wherever you are. You've done a ton of work to get here, and we're super excited for you. So, clap. Great. We have a lot of information to cover. And we're really excited to share with you some of the programs and supports that we have as part of the Pathway Oregon Award. So let's get started. There are 4 main goals that we want to cover during our time today. The first one is reviewing the Pathway Oregon program and support. So that's the stuff that Jeff and I do. Next, we're going to talk about the financial aid offer so you understand a little bit more about how the money works and help you plan to cover the costs that you're going to need to cover when you come to campus. And then identifying financial aid requirements that you need to take care of, preferably as soon as possible. Again, we're going to cover a lot of information, but please remember that we are here to help. There are advisors, financial aid counselors, and students who are staffing the Q&A to help you. So as you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask, and we'll answer a couple more at the end of the session. Okay. Sorry, I forgot. We need to help you meet the rest of the team. So I'm actually going to play a quick video that will share a little bit more about what we can do to support you and help you meet the rest of the Pathway Oregon staff.
Making the transition to college is a pretty big deal. It's exciting, but also complicated, and you might find yourself with a lot of questions throughout the process. But something really special about being a Pathway Oregon student is that you have access to an entire team of advisors dedicated to helping you stay on track to achieve your goals at the UO. Here are some of the ways that advisors can help you along your journey.
Lots of students enter college unsure of what major they want to pick or what career they want to pursue. We can help you clarify your interests, set goals, and plan to make the most of your time at UO.
We can help you understand your degree requirements, build a schedule each term, and create a 4-year graduation plan.
If you find yourself struggling in a class for the first time, a lot of students do, and we can help connect you to free tutoring or other resources that you might not know about yet.
Even with your tuition covered, figuring out how to pay for college can be a challenge. We can help you finalize your housing decision, understand your student bill, or even learn how to track your expenses to create a budget.
There may be times when you know exactly what you want to do, but won't know where to start. We're here to help you figure out next steps.
Most of all, know that we're here for you. Our job is to help you succeed, so don't ever hesitate to reach out.
What a friendly bunch. I know that was a long list of ways that we can support you. You don't have to remember all of it. That holds true for the entire presentation. But please know that we're here and we're excited to work with you. One of the ways that we track our work together is actually through the Pathway Oregon Partnership Agreement. The Partnership Agreement is a series of benchmarks that we know successful students use to stay on track to graduate in 4 years and prepare for a successful launch after U of O. Some of those things include working with an advisor like me or Jeff or any of the people that you met in the video, creating a plan for graduation, and making yearly progress on your degree requirements. We'll help you keep track of those things, and we'll reach out whenever we think it would be helpful, but they're really meant to be just a helpful guideline for you. After the session, you're going to receive an email with a link for more information from us and a place where you can actually review and sign the Pathway Oregon Partnership Agreement. So you'll be able to get all of that info and kind of renew that commitment to us as we work together when you come. In addition to a connection to the advising team, you also have the opportunity to be connected with a continuing Pathway Oregon student. Those are for actual Pathway Oregon students who have mentored. These students are here to be your peer mentor and to help you transition to life at UO. There are a couple things that if you decide to opt into the program that mentors will do for you. One of them is check in with you weekly and just to see how you're doing, answer any questions you have, provide tips for success that even advisors might not know, and just generally be there to be another person who knows who you are and cares about how things are going. So if you're interested in being part of that program and being connected to a student, you'll have the opportunity to sign up when you actually complete the partnership agreement. They're in the same place, so there's a little bit less for you to keep track of. Okay, so we know that we're here for you, but we also know that successful students often have a huge support team and a network all across campus. And one of our goals is to help you explore those connections, find your interests, and connect to support. For some students, that might mean accessing free tutoring through the Tutoring and Academic Engagement Center, or taking classes or engaging in other support that they can have or provide. But for other students, it means connecting with other offices and programs, like the Center for Multicultural Academic Excellence, TRIO Student Support Services, student orgs, major advisors, and undergraduate research. There are lots and lots of people on campus who are here to help you. So if you ever need something or want to figure out where you need to go, your Pathway Oregon advisors are really trying to be a hub for you, so you don't have to kind of float out there on your own. So that's a lot about the program side. We know that it's really important to cover some more information about how the money works. So I am actually going to hand it over to Jeff to talk about covering tuition costs.
Thanks, Selena. And again, I'm really glad to have a chance to talk with all of you today. And I do look forward to working with a lot of you through the summer and certainly at the start of fall term when you arrive. And as Selena mentioned, there are a few things that we feel are really important to cover related to financial aid and covering costs. So in just a minute, we'll begin with some slides that look at the financial aid offer in order to understand exactly how the Pathway Oregon award or aid offer works. And then after that, we will spend some time covering how to cover costs outside of tuition and fees, and that would be housing and other expenses. And then, of course, before we finish, we do want to make sure that we discuss what the financial aid requirements are and to let you know how to check for those to make sure that before fall term begins, you're ready to go and your financial aid is ready to go also. So let's start by looking at a slide that shows two buckets. And in one bucket, it indicates what is covered by Pathway Oregon, and then the second bucket, what's not covered. And so we'll start first by looking at the bucket in yellow that identifies what is covered by Pathway Oregon. And you can see that it, of course, covers 100% of the tuition for the courses that students enroll in. It also includes the mandatory fees, and so whenever a student registers for courses in a given term, those mandatory fees are also assessed, but that is also covered by Pathway Oregon. And sometimes when students take individual classes, those courses might have an additional course fee. A common example of that might be a PE course. But the good news for Pathway Oregon students is, again, those course fees are covered through the Pathway Oregon Financial Promise. And then finally, there's the matriculation fee, and that's a fee that all students are assessed in the first term they're enrolled at the university. But again, all of these fees are covered through Pathway Oregon.
Yay! That's the best part.
That is the fun part. So the other thing I should stress before we look at the other bucket is a common question that we have, which relates to how long the Pathway Oregon grant lasts for students in the program. And so the Financial Aid Office oversees the Pathway Oregon grant, and students are eligible for up to 12 terms of the Pathway Oregon grant within a 5-year period. And so if you're enrolled continuously for 4 years, remember we're on the quarter system, you'd use 3 terms per year. So in 4 years, you would use your 12 terms of eligibility. But sometimes, as we know, things happen that we don't plan for. And so if a student needs to take a term or even 3 terms off, you still can maximize that 12 terms of Pathway Oregon grant eligibility within that 5-year period. So it affords a little more flexibility just to take care of sometimes what might happen in life. So let's look now at what's not covered. And so each student will have different expenses related to books and the cost of purchasing those, personal expenses, and for some of you, transportation. But for Pathway Oregon students, the biggest expense to cover is housing. And so we want to spend a little bit of time talking about then the ways in which the financial aid offer works in order to figure out before the session ends how you can plan to make sure to cover those costs as well. So again, going back to the yellow bucket and what's covered, let's begin to look at your financial aid offer to determine what parts of that offer will be used for covering tuition and fees. And so if you fill the bucket first, you can see we have federal and state grants. And so being in Pathway Oregon means that all of you are eligible for the Pell Grant. So that's something that all of you will have, but that also means that's something that you will use first toward your tuition and fees. And then depending on your particular aid offer and the FAFSA information you provided, some of you might have other federal and state grants. And so one example would be the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, and we like to call it SEOG, just to make it a little bit easier. And then again, some of you might also qualify for the state-funded Oregon Opportunity Grant. But again, all of you will have the Pell Grant, but all 3 of these, if you have them, would be applied first toward tuition and fees. And then some of you may have additional scholarships, and if you do, congratulations. It's another sign of the hard work you've done. But you can see the list here on the slide includes those scholarships that would be applied toward tuition and fees. And to name a few, that would be the Summit or the Apex or perhaps the UO tuition waiver or the Diversity Excellence Scholarship. But again, all of those scholarships are also applied toward tuition and fees. And then if in total, after applying those grants and scholarships, more funding is needed to make sure that 100% of your tuition is covered, that's when the Financial Aid Office steps in and applies the Pathway Oregon Grant 12 credits. And it's 12 credits because students have to be enrolled full-time in order to receive their full financial aid, including the Pathway Oregon Grant. So we know as Pathway Oregon students, you'll be in 12 credits. And so that'll be used to fill in and cover the tuition and fees. But what happens if you take more than 12 credits? And that's a really common situation. Oftentimes a student will take 4 classes, which might total 16 credits, and then maybe add a PE course, and that would suddenly make it 17 credits. Well, here's the good news. That's where the Financial Aid Office, if needed, would then apply the Pathway Oregon Grant over 12 credits to cover whatever additional costs there might be. Because at the UO, tuition and fees are charged by credit. So the more credits a student takes, the higher the tuition and fees would be. But for Pathway Oregon students, it's covered. Now, again, each aid offer is different for every Pathway Oregon student. So on your particular aid offer, you might see one or both of these Pathway Oregon grants. Or it's possible if you have a lot of other UO scholarships, you might not even see a Pathway Oregon grant. but collectively, all of these funds together will work to make sure that everything's covered. So now let's spend a little bit of time looking at what's not covered. And we identified some parts of your financial aid offer that already would be used for tuition and fees. There are still some parts of your financial aid offer that you can use to cover housing and other expenses. And we started by filling that bucket with the student loans first, and that's because for the students who have student loans on their financial aid offer, those are guaranteed. If they choose to accept those, then they can receive those funds. An important thing to remember, though, is that the total amount a student can get from the student loans will not fully cover the cost of housing for those students living on campus. So it can help toward paying that, but students will need other funding sources in order to cover the rest. And that's why we've listed next the other scholarships. And what we mean by that is a lot of students may be coming in with scholarships outside the University of Oregon. And that might include, for example, a scholarship from the student's high school, or a tribal scholarship, or a scholarship from a private organization. All of these can be used to pay housing costs. They would not be applied toward tuition and fees. So the more scholarships you have, the better. And I'll make a plug, even for following years, never stop looking for more scholarships. It's best to continue getting more so that you can cover not just tuition and fees, but the other costs you'll have as a student as well. One other thing I should mention about the outside or other scholarships is that there are a few academic department scholarships offered to first-year students. And for a couple of examples, that could include the School of Journalism or the School of Music. But if you're receiving academic department scholarships, those two can be applied here toward housing. They would not be applied toward tuition and fees. But again, later we'll give you more information about how to contact us if you have questions about your particular aid offer and even your outside scholarships to get a better understanding of where and how those might be applied. Now, finally, you can see that we've listed a few other funding sources, but those are in bubbles. And the reason we did that is because those are not necessarily guaranteed for every student to use toward housing costs. And the first one is the Parent Plus loan. I can see on the slide it says loans, but there is only one. There's a Parent Plus loan that might be offered to each student. And the difference too with the Parent Plus loan is this is not a loan that a student can take out. This is one that a parent who might be able and willing to take out that loan can do so and then have that applied toward the student's expenses. Now, the Parent Plus loan also requires an application for a parent to complete, and there's also a credit check applied. Finally, one more funding source that students will probably see on their financial aid offer is work study. And work study is different from a lot of the other funding sources that we've talked about in that if it's accepted, this is not one that we think you can really use readily to help pay for housing charges in particular. Instead, it's a great funding source to use maybe for personal expenses throughout the term, or if you continue to earn more and save some money, you might even be able to use some of that for books for subsequent terms. But work study, even if you accept it, still requires you to get a job and then to work hours like you would at any other job. And so you would be receiving that funding in a monthly paycheck. So it's not something that you could apply at the very beginning of the term toward the cost of your housing charges. But again, it's a great resource to pay for some of those other expenses. And then finally, the out-of-pocket bubble refers to potential savings that students and/or families might have in order to help pay for some of these outside expenses, housing and other expenses. So if you have that, great. That's certainly a wonderful way to help pay for the costs, and if you have enough perhaps to reduce or even eliminate some of the loans that a student might need to take out in order to cover those costs. Okay, I just covered a lot of information. And again, we will be around through the summer to help you with additional questions. But at this time, I want to turn it back over to Selena so that she can speak a little bit more about how you can cover your other costs outside of tuition and fees, depending upon your living situation.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, just to echo what Jeff said, we realize that there's a lot of variation in probably what you're seeing on your financial aid offer. Every situation is different, and you probably have a lot of questions, but We are here to help, and one of the things that we're going to do now is I'm just going to walk you through some of the common scenarios that students find themselves in, just to help illustrate how your financial aid funding will work based on your housing situation. So as a disclaimer in the beginning, all first-year students are required to live on campus. There are lots of good reasons for this. It helps you get connected to resources. It helps you transition to life at UO, but it is a requirement, so that's kind of the default where most students find themselves in their first year. But there are instances where students either will opt to live off campus for their first year or will decide to continue living at home. If you want to go either of these routes, you do need to file an exemption on the housing registration, preferably by July 31st, so by the end of the month, just to let housing know that you're not planning to live on campus. This will also help you start making plans for how you're going to cover those costs if you're not living on campus. So that's just a disclaimer. I'll say it a lot more just because, and let's go through each of these scenarios, starting from the most common, which is living on campus. So as I mentioned, this is a requirement, so most of you will fall into this category. As Jeff mentioned, we know that federal direct student loans are on most students' award packages, and that's guaranteed funding, so that's why it's listed first. You can use that funding to help cover the cost of housing, but as Jeff mentioned, it won't cover all of it. As an example, most like standard double room rates will run you a little bit over $12,000 a year. All freshmen usually are guaranteed about $5,500 in funding in their federal direct student loans. So that won't cover even half of what you need for your housing, which is going to be charged to your student account. So if you have other scholarships, as Jeff mentioned, you can use those to help fill that bucket. And if you don't, or even if you do, you might need to talk to your parent about the Parent Plus loan opportunity or see what you can manage out of pocket or what other plans you want to make. But it is really important that if you're living on campus, which is the requirement, that you have a plan to cover those costs before you arrive. So just as a couple takeaways, living on campus is going to be either around or a little bit more than the cost of tuition. So it's really important that you acknowledge that and have a plan to cover that. It will be charged to your student account at the beginning of every term, so you'll have this kind of a lump charge at the beginning of the term that then you'll need to kind of sort out how you're going to pay. And the student loans that you're offered alone won't cover your housing, so you really, really need to either investigate these other funding sources or take a look at your budget and see what's going to be feasible for you. Okay. If you maybe take a look at this and you're like, oh, I'm not sure that living on campus is going to be feasible, or maybe you have like a medical reason you need an exemption from the live-on policy, or you have an older sibling or a relative nearby and you would like to live off campus, you can do that. Again, you have to file an exemption on the housing registration, preferably by the end of the month. If you go this route and the exemption is approved, your financial aid offer and your funding will work pretty similarly, in that tuition and fees will be covered by your federal, state, and UO grants and scholarships as part of the Pathway Oregon aid offer. And then you'll still have federal direct student loans, other scholarships, and the Parent Plus loan, out-of-pocket savings, etc., that you can use to cover the cost of rent. A couple of things to keep in mind about living off campus is that you have a lot of control over where you decide to live and what those expenses are. I've worked with a student who had a one-bedroom apartment for like $1,500. I wouldn't recommend going that route, but if you can swing it, okay. So keep that budget in mind. So you have variable costs, and those utilities are often also billed monthly, so the kind of timeline of your charges and when you need to make payments is going to be different than if you're living on campus, and it won't be charged to your student account, it'll just be charged to you as a person out in the world. You can still use your student loan offer and other funding to help cover those housing costs, even if you're living off campus. So the funding doesn't go away just because you're not staying here. And you have to file an exemption request on the housing registration if you want to live off campus. We would also really encourage you, if you want to go this route, to talk to us. we are here to help you figure out your budget, what's going to be feasible, and help you understand a little bit more about how the funding will work and what the timeline might be. So we are here if you need help with that process. Okay, the last one is living at home. This makes financing really easy for Pathway Oregon students because it's usually no cost. So if you have your tuition and fees covered through the Pathway Oregon aid offer, then you have all of these other funding sources and really no other expenses, or no major expense if housing is covered. But you do still have access to the federal direct student loans, other scholarships, and work study if you want to access any of those opportunities to help you cover, like maybe buy a new computer, or if you have a Starbucks habit, work study could maybe fund most of that. Whatever expenses come up, especially books, you can use these funding sources to help you cover those things. And there might be a little bit more to go around if you are just living at home and don't have a housing cost. So this situation is great. The takeaways here are usually living at home doesn't cost you very much. You can still use your funding for additional expenses, and you still have to file an exemption on the housing registration. I hope you kind of get that vibe so far. Preferably by July 31st. Even if there's no change to you because you're just going to continue living at home, housing still needs to know. So make sure to do that. Okay, as Jeff mentioned, every Pathway Oregon aid offer is different. So if maybe one of your friends is also a Pathway Oregon award recipient and you're comparing financial aid offers and they have the grant and you don't, or maybe you have presidential and they don't, no one's being bamboozled. It's not a scam. It's just different. So know that your tuition and fees are still going to be covered. The other parts of your aid offer can be used for other expenses. And the most important thing for you to figure out this summer is how to cover those other costs, like housing. It's really, really important that you have that plan before you arrive. And we are here to help. We know it's very complicated, and we've done it a lot. Okay, so that's all of those pieces. Unfortunately, none of it matters if you still have financial aid requirements to do. So until you finish those requirements and confirm that your financial aid offer is official, you can't really start to plan. So I'm going to turn it back to Jeff to talk about those requirements.
Thanks, Selena. And you're absolutely right in that this is a critical step for every student, just to double check and to do it early to make sure that you finished all of the financial aid requirements you might have. You've finalized your financial aid offer and your eligibility for Pathway Oregon. So I'm going to review what those requirements might be and where to look for them. And you'll get more information again at the end of the presentation that'll help direct you to our website so that you can go through the checklist and contact us if you have any questions, but certainly know how to identify where on DuckWeb to look for these requirements. And let's start just by talking about verification. So this is a really common process that students go through, oftentimes every year. And really what it is after students complete the FAFSA, then oftentimes the Office of Student Financial Aid and Scholarships needs to verify that the information you put on the FAFSA is correct. And so in order to do that verification, it sometimes means getting additional documents or information to complete that process. But again, the important thing to remember is if you do still have financial aid requirements to complete, your financial aid offer is not official and your Pathway Oregon eligibility is not official until this process is complete. And you can see that we've posted the deadline here as October 16th, but please don't wait that long. I talked earlier about the FAFSA deadline and getting it done early. This is really something I would recommend you start by checking later today. And if you need more assistance to get this completed, you can work on that this summer and as quickly as you can. And we will be happy to take you or assist you through that process.
Can I chime in quickly?
Please.
We do panic. The closer you get to October 16th, we start to really worry. So please save both of us a little bit of stress and save yourself some stress and get it done as soon as possible. Please don't make us panic.
Thank you. No, it's absolutely true, Selena. We spend a lot of time doing everything we can to make sure students understand the importance of this. not only to get it done, but to get it done early, because sometimes this process can get complicated and it can be a little timely depending on the type of information you need to provide. So it is very important to start working on this soon, and we will be glad to help you. So again, you will have directions on DuckWeb to look for this at the end of the presentation. And then once you've completed the verification process and you're here for fall term, we thought it would probably be important to cover what you need to do to make sure you maintain your eligibility for Pathway Oregon moving forward. And so we tried to break this down by two categories: what you need to do every term, and then what you need to get done every year. So every term, it's pretty simple. Students just need to make sure that they continue to stay enrolled full time. And again, we've talked about that before, but that's a minimum of 12 credits, and it can be more, but you must make sure you're registered as a full-time student. And then every year, first and most important, you have to get that FAFSA done every year, and it has to be done by the UO priority deadline of March 1st. And so the FAFSA is actually open starting October 1st, so students can get started on this, and parents, months in advance. And you really can do it in October because the FAFSA asks for information from 2 years prior with regard to financial aid and tax info. So we're here to help if you even want to get some assistance getting that done, but make sure you meet that deadline. And then once you've completed the FAFSA, students do have to qualify for the Pell Grant each year. And so typically, as long as the FAFSA information doesn't change significantly from year to year, that's not a problem. Students would remain eligible for the Pell Grant. But for whatever reason, if you're anticipating a significant change from one year to the next, or if you have any additional questions, I would just recommend this summer to get in touch with the Financial Aid Office, and you can email them via their website, or you can start by talking to a Pathway Oregon advisor. And while we don't oversee that part of the process, we're very familiar with a lot of this information, and we can certainly provide some good general information. And if it seems like you have more complicated questions, we certainly can get you connected to the right people in the Financial Aid Office too. And then finally, the last requirement is not a Pathway Oregon specific requirement, but it's something all students need to complete. And that's what's called Satisfactory Academic Progress, or SAP, or SAP. And what that means is at the end of the year, so after the spring term or spring quarter, the Financial Aid Office will review all transcripts, and they're looking for two things essentially. One, that you have a cumulative 2.0 UO GPA, and that also you're meeting what they call 67% pace of completion. And what that means is you are in essence passing 2/3 or 67% of the total credits you've attempted. Okay, so we, as we've mentioned many times, have covered a lot of information. We do encourage you to stay in touch with us if you have more questions, but given all the information we shared, we wanted to make sure that you remember 3 things today.
Okay, so the first one is you have to check your UOregon email. You're going to get a message after the presentation with some steps and information from us. So check your email.
And then next, we do want you to go to our website, pathwayoregon.uoregon.edu, and you'll see a tab for new students. And once you get to that page, there will be a checklist that we've referred to, and we want you to go through that checklist to make sure that you stay on track.
Completing the checklist will make sure that you start your year off strong and that you have kind of all your ducks in a row. I did it. I did it. I was a duck joke. So please keep an eye out for the email. You can check our website. The website's also in the email, so just keep an eye out for the email and run through that checklist. Again, we're here as you have questions at any point. That's what we're here for.
And Cora, we'd like to invite you back to see if there are any additional questions that we might be able to answer.
There are indeed. Thank you so much, Jeff and Selena. I've been following along here on my phone to the questions coming in from our student viewers, and we've got some good ones, and I think some of them require a little bit of nuanced conversation about some of the things that you talked about already. So to start with, Trevor wants to know, do you have to reapply for Pathway each year? And I know that you mentioned completing the FAFSA each year. Can you talk a little bit about the distinction between applying for FAFSA or completing the FAFSA versus applying for Pathway?
Sure, I'd be glad to take that one. And so you do not need to reapply in any formal way for Pathway Oregon eligibility or renewal. And really it goes back to the slide that we covered that identifies the 3 things you need to do each year, which is complete the FAFSA, remain eligible for the Pell Grant, and then again, of course, make sure that if there are any additional financial aid requirements, like the ones that we talked about that you need to check this summer, you may need to check for that process again in subsequent years as well. And then finally, meeting that satisfactory academic progress requirement that all students need to meet, not just Pathway Oregon students.
Perfect, thank you. So there's some specific questions about what Pathway Oregon covers, specifically some additional fee-related items. Devin wants to know, does Pathway cover additional exam fees such as CLEP tests?
I can take that one. That's a great question. So Pathway Oregon will cover fees that are attached to courses that you're registered in. So if you're taking a PE course and that has like a $90 fee attached to it, that's something that Pathway Oregon can cover because it's attached to your tuition and the courses that you're in. If you are taking a CLEP exam or a language placement test that has a fee attached to it, since it's not connected to a course that you're in, it's not a fee that Pathway Oregon can cover. But we are happy to help you plan other ways to cover those costs.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Speaking about talking with students about making plans, one of the students, Savannah, asked, who should I contact if I want to talk about my whole college costs and how to manage it? And I think that points back to the email that they're going to get here after this session. Can one of you help Savannah understand who she's going to talk to?
Sure, I'd be glad to answer that. And I think one thing we try to share to all of the students in Pathway Oregon is that you can really treat us as a hub for any first question you have. And oftentimes when it's related to financial aid, we're very familiar with these processes and we might be able to answer all of those questions for you in the time that we have together. But we also know how to get you connected on campus. We also know how to reach out to people if we need to, if it seems like there are other questions that we can't get to. But I think a good rule of thumb is just to know that our full-time job as Pathway Oregon advisors is to work with you as students. And it's the best part of our job. And so know that you can come to us anytime with any question. And again, if we don't have the answer, we know how to find the answers and get you connected elsewhere.
Perfect, thank you. We have a number of questions that have come in about work study, in particular, students who've been offered work study as part of their financial aid package. Brandon wants to know, when can we start applying for work study jobs? Madison wants to know, if you check the work study box on DuckWeb, are you required to get a job? And so let's start with Brandon's question about when can they start looking for those work study jobs.
Yep, I can do it. So work study is a great opportunity. It doesn't guarantee you a job, obviously, which is one of the things that we covered, but it does make you a little bit more attractive to hire. So often students who have work study awards have an easier time finding employment, and we're happy to help you through that process. So to Brandon's question, you can start applying for jobs now. All student jobs, campus positions are listed on a Handshake through the University Career Center. So if you haven't activated your Handshake account, that would be a great thing to start with. And as you have questions or you want resume help or anything like that, we are also on hand.
And if I could add to that, the Career Center will be doing an interest session in early August, and we will be providing them with all of the new students' names and information so they can automatically activate your accounts in Handshake prior to that. So know that that process is in process right now with the Career Center, and so your Handshake account will be automatically activated here in a couple of weeks, and then the Career Center will do some more presentations around finding campus jobs in the middle part of August. So stay tuned for that information, but you can certainly reach out to the Career Center now if you're looking to activate your Handshake account a little bit earlier. It just takes a little bit longer to do for you. So how about we get to Madison's question about whether or not they're required to get a job if they accepted that work study in their financial aid offer.
I could do that one too. So if you are kind of on the fence about whether or not you want to work during your first year, because I know a lot of students just want to get acclimated, and there are lots of things kind of up in the air right now, I would go ahead and still accept it on DuckWeb in the financial aid menu. you're not required to find a job. They can't guarantee one. So you're not required to get a job if you don't want to, but it does mean that that work-study funding would be there to help cover your wages if and whenever you did find a position. So not required, but a good idea to accept it if you're thinking about it.
Well, I'd also like to add just one more thing with regard to the work study, because sometimes students are a little leery of finding or committing to work in the first term when they're trying to get situated and make sure that they're handling all of their classes efficiently and successfully. And maybe they want to start in the winter term in January. And that's perfectly fine. So even if you accept it now, all it does is hold the opportunity for you to find a job at any time throughout the academic year.
Perfect. And I would add a couple of things based on the research that's out there about student success. Actually having a job or being involved in something for 10 to 15 hours a week is often helpful to a student in terms of planning their day and scheduling their time and keeping them on track with their homework and their outside of classroom requirements or commitments. And so having a job can be helpful to your ultimate success. So do consider that. But Jeff's advice around maybe giving it some time to settle in and get the lay of the land as to how higher education works and how university learning is different is not a bad idea either. So do keep those things in mind as you're talking through it, and certainly Jeff and Selena and all of their colleagues are really good at giving you that advice. So Josh wants to know another work study question. What are the maximum amount of hours a student can work in a week?
I'll keep going on the work study train. These are such good questions. I'm super impressed. So good job, everybody. As a work study student, you can work a maximum of 25 hours a week. Wages really vary, so it kind of depends on who you're working for and what your job is in terms of what your wage is, but it goes from minimum wage up.
Fantastic. Okay, so let's ask one more question, and I think I'm going to add a little bit of my own twist on this question from Samantha. Are we meeting with a pathway advisor when we meet with our academic advisor in August? So that's a first excellent question. And then if you could add on there, from your perspective as academic advisors and often mentors to our first year students and students throughout their career at the U of O, can you talk a little bit about the importance of that relationship with an academic advisor and how often a student who's in your program should be meeting with a PathwayOregon advisor?
How do you want to handle this, Jeff?
I'd be glad to start. So I think it speaks to a really good question that students often have is, who is my advisor and which advisor should I see if I have more than one advisor? For example, not just a PathwayOregon advisor, but maybe a flight path advisor or a major department advisor or a Clark Honors College advisor or a CMA advisor. So again, this speaks to what Selena talked about before, where we really believe that the most successful students create a team of support, and that includes the advisors as well. So we do expect that students will meet with us, particularly in the first year, at least once a term. And that way we can make sure that you are getting connected and getting the help and the support that you need to be successful while you're here. And maybe it gives us an opportunity to give you ideas about other resources and opportunities on campus. But it's also common for students to meet with more than one advisor, and that's perfectly fine. So we often have students who meet with us for some reasons, and then they connect with other academic advisors for other reasons or for other parts of their plan while they're here. And that's something we would encourage.
Can I add one thing about introduction? So based on your major and kind of where you're located on campus or some of your salient identities or other programs you're connected to, you may or may not meet with a PathwayOregon advisor for your advising session. If you are an exploring student and don't have other programs that you're connected to, most likely you'll meet with a pathway advisor. If not, then you're probably going to be meeting with someone who has expertise in the particular major that you have, just to help you make those connections. So a little bit of a mixed bag, but we're certainly around for whatever you need this summer.
Well, and to add to that, Selena mentioned earlier that the PathwayOregon team will be reaching out to you after today's program because they do want to talk with each and every Pathway Oregon student to make sure that you're feeling confident and that you have you're getting off on the right foot here at the University of Oregon. So regardless, they will be emailing you, and we do want to make sure that you schedule that appointment and really talk with them, ask your questions. They are a tremendous resource on our campus, and that won't be your academic advising appointment necessarily, but it is an opportunity for you to develop some confidence around all of this, because it can be complicated. So we want to take care of you. That's all the time that we have today. Thank you for joining us this morning. For more information about this and any introduction presentation, please visit our website at orientation.youoregon.edu. You can also email us your questions at orientation@youoregon.edu, or you can text us at 541-346-1159. I also would be remiss if I didn't plug Flock Talk, which is our podcast. We did do some episode work around academic advising, and that episode will air in the next couple of weeks to prepare you for your academic advising appointment and how to ask the best questions of your academic advisor and make sure that that conversation goes really well. So please tune in to that as well. It's an important resource for you. Thanks so much for your time this morning. I'm really glad that you joined us. And to you, Jeff and Selena, thank you for your time and being there for our new decks.
Happy to do it. Thanks.